Hi, welcome to the Daiku Podcast. I'm Gary Snow. Joining me today is Owen Davey, a wonderful illustrator from the UK that is launching Fame and Fable, a competitive hand-building light fantasy game. Owen, welcome.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Well, I normally kind of steer myself into like tabletop role-playing games. That's like my bread and butter, and like kind of indie games and that kind of thing. However, when I saw your game, I was like, okay, I need to have Owen on the show because like I was just absolutely taken with it. It's like scratching a lot of itches for me that I just like immediately said I gotta learn more about this. So I'm very happy that you could join us today.
That's really kind. Thank you very much. Yeah, no, I've watched some of your videos, so and I was like, oh, am I gonna fit in? But I trust your judgment.
Well, Fame and Fable is going to be launching on February the 18th. So we're recording this a little bit ahead of time. So we might have like a loose sketch of some of the details, but I think we'll have like at least most of the information at hand. But first of all, before we get started, I always ask my guests like, a little bit about their history. And in your case, like, I mean, I love your illustration, and let's start there. Like, where did you get into illustration? Were you like one of those kids that just doodled and draw all the time?
Yeah, I mean, I never stopped. Literally, that question of what do you want to be when you grow up? I was asked that question as a kid in primary school, and the answer was that I wanted to write and draw pictures for kids' books. And I never deviated from that path. I've just always drawn. Like, my family are really sporty. We'd go on, these trips to Cornwall in the UK, and they'd go surfing, and I'd inevitably get cold and come in and just start drawing with a little doodle pad and stuff instead. And yeah, I mean, that's what I spent all my spare time doing. So I've just always drawn. But yeah, I mean, I've been working professionally as an illustrator for about 15, 16 years. After going to university in Falmouth, which is in Cornwall in the UK, studying illustration there. Just a very kind of direct route. It's a really boring story. It's just, I wanted to be an illustrator, so I trained to be an illustrator, and then I became an illustrator. But yeah, I just love it. I just love drawing and doodling and the creativity that it brings. So yeah.
And did you have any inspirations as far as like, was there any, just say children's books or illustrators that you were like, oh, like that really speaks to me?
Do you know what? I get asked that question quite a lot, and I don't think there was any one specific thing. I liked the variety. I liked the fact that you could create these little worlds. There was a couple of ones that kind of stick in my head. So, Where the Wild Things Are, the Maurice Sendak book, and there's like this book that's like a traditional African folktale that my uncle brought back from Kenya, because I mean, that's a long story. I won't get into that. But anyway, he was in Kenya for a long time, and it's called Hot Hippo, and that one sticks in my head and stuff as well. But it wasn't necessarily what it was, like the content of it or anything. It was just the idea of like bringing a story to life, bringing an idea to life through kind of story and words and images and stuff. So yeah, I still find it fascinating. And I think with kids' books, the reason I really like kids' books is that they've got equal importance. Like, it's very rare that you've got image and text both being the same importance, but in a kid's book, they're like both essential and doing different things. And there's this kind of interplay between them. So yeah, board games is a little bit different, but yeah.
Well, and I'm curious, like when you went into university to be a trained professional illustrator versus like when you came in. And the reason I asked this is I remember, and I'll just do a little tangent here, is I started a job like fresh out of school. And I was like hammered down, like, no, you have to conform to the brand. You have to conform to the brand. But the very first project I did was the very best project I did. Looking back upon it, when I left, I was cleaning up my desk and I was like, I was actually much better at the beginning of this job than at the end of it. And with illustration, like, in order to break the rules, you got to know the rules. Like, how does that fit in for like your journey as far as being an illustrator? Did you like get molded into shape and then finally break free from that, or did you actually learn new techniques that you wanted to trigger in your career?
Yeah, I think, like, to be honest, it was probably more the latter. I mean, because I always did illustration. I always drew. I didn't know what illustration was, but I was doing it anyway. And then I went through art foundation and stuff. At college I did, sorry, there's different language for different things, but like when I was sort of 17, 18ish sort of age, I was doing fine art, graphics philosophy and maths, which is an interesting combo, but actually all of them really useful for my current job. And a lot of the fine art and graphics was teaching me like skill-based stuff. You know, they was teaching me to think and stuff as well, but it was like, you know, this is how you paint and this is how you do these sort of things. And there's still some like hangovers of stuff that I was taught then that I use in my work now. This is a tangent, but let's go with it. You said go with tangents. Let's go with it. So I hardly ever use pure black or pure white. And it's because my painting teacher basically said, you know, if you use straight out of the bottle kind of black and white, it's got nothing to do with your piece. It feels disconnected. So I always built black out of a dark blue and a brown, because you kind of got this greater depth to it. And I always built my whites with like a little bit of yellow or a little bit of pink or something to link it back into the piece. And even now I sort of find it awkward using like 100% black or, you know, 100% white. So those sort of things, you know, sort of stick with you. So I was doing skill-based stuff for a long time, and then there's like an art foundation thing, which is between, you know, doing that college bit and then going to university, where essentially they spent a year just like breaking you down and then rebuilding you, because it was a lot of it was about this idea of, you know, trying to explore ideas first, that prioritizing the ideas and trying to get that amazing, you know, if you've got a polished thing at the end, but the idea sucks, then there's no point. So they did that. And, you know, we specialized in certain areas, and obviously I went into illustration within that. But by the end of that year, I did a video about pigeons where I was dressed as a pigeon, and it was nothing to do with illustration. There was illustration stuff, so, you know, connected to it, but it was, you know, it was very much ideas based. And then Falmouth University, what's amazing about it is that it is built to be like a commercial place. Like you're thinking about being a commercial illustrator from day one that you're getting there. So then there are some universities that have got a little bit of a house style. It's a really cool house style. But like Falmouth is like, I guess, uncool in that respect, in that it's just like, let's think about how this works in a practical sense. But for me, that's exactly what I needed. I needed to know, you know, professional practice, how I show portfolios, how I get work, how I fulfill a brief, color theory, how to build a book, all this stuff, which then, you know, I sort of hit the ground running when I kind of came out of university and just straight into trying to get work. Yeah, sorry, that was a real tangent from the question.
No, well, no, that's terrific. And I like, it's nice to kind of peek behind the curtain and kind of see the creative process. And so you talked about that you started getting clients and like, you know, contracts to do illustrations. Were you able to also maintain like your own individual, like just for fun work, or did it kind of primarily just become contract work?
To be honest, like to start off with, it was because I didn't have a lot of jobs on. It was all about trying to get work. So I was setting myself briefs that interested me, and then trying to fulfill them to try and, you know, if I wanted to get editorial work, I'd be doing editorial stuff and sending that off to clients or book covers or whatever. But I'm a firm believer of actually you can find joy in the most mundane job usually as well. Like, you know, if I get a job about, I don't know what it's like to be a boss in a workplace. You know, I've had a job like that before where I've ended up drawing a cat as a pharaoh, and it's this, you know, dominating kind of cat. And it's so there's ways, I think, to like put yourself into it and find a way that you find interesting. So I was trying to do that really early on with any of the projects I got. I was like, well, what do I find interesting about it? What can I bring into it? So yeah, sorry, I don't know if I can't remember. I go off on tangent.
Well, and the reason that kind of leads into my next question, which is, so when you thought about Fame and Fable, was this like kind of for you that you were like, this is something that I want to do? Like, I don't know how many other projects that you've had that you just went like, this is on me. This is the way I want it to look.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't even necessarily the visual side of it. It was the idea of just doing something completely for myself, completely without having and I love working with my clients. I've worked with so many different clients over the years, and the ones I don't like working with, I never work with again, which is the joy of being freelance. So, you know, the ones that I've worked with continuously are great, but there is this thing of there might be certain choices they make or certain things that they're looking for that maybe I would go a different direction. And I hadn't done it in so long. I've been busy for, you know, 10 years at least in my sort of 15-year career. And when lockdown, I mean, so many stories these days start with lockdown things, but COVID hit and lockdown and stuff, there was a lot less work about, a lot less kind of my usual stuff, and I just had this a little bit of space to think kind of a little bit beyond kind of what I was usually doing, and thinking, well, what did I used to do for fun? And I was doing a D&D with some mates, and I was the DM for a bit. We sort of were taking it in turns. I was the DM for a bit, and I thought, well, my strong suit is my illustration. So rather than write 2 pages worth of description of this monster, let's just draw this monster, right? Or rather than try and explain what this NPC looks like, this is how they look. And that kind of ignited something in me that I was doing as a kid. I used to draw from like games magazines and stuff, like copy Link out of Zelda and things like that, and do all that sort of stuff as a kid. And I haven't had the chance professionally to do it so much. But interestingly, since starting doing Fame and Fable stuff, like more of that sort of job type stuff is starting to come in. I've had a couple of opportunities to do stuff that's a bit more kind of fantasy inspired, or and it's actually influenced the sort of style I'm kind of the way of working I'm approaching at the moment with my work as well. So it's interesting. Yeah, it's fun to do something just for the love of it.
Well, let me pop up on the screen here, just a kind of brief overview of the illustration and the style of it. So immediately, I'm sure everybody watching at home, and sorry for those listening via podcast that can't see this, but go check it out on YouTube. Right off the bat, like the vibrant colors and just the black and the pinks and the blues and that kind of thing. Is this how long did it take you to kind of come to this kind of look, so to speak? Did you play around with it quite a while, or?
So the colors took a while to get right because of a range of different factors, but because I wanted to keep it consistent throughout the whole lot, I wanted to make sure that they worked on the different card styles and that there was enough colors, but I was keeping it limited enough. But the style itself kind of was born out of necessity, in that when I was doing these kind of D&D illustrations, I just wanted to sketch stuff out. So I just literally drew stuff nice and kind of quick and with confidence, because nothing mattered, if that makes sense. So I was just drawing these things, and then I was like, oh well, it'd be quite fun to actually make these look a little bit more polished to share with the players. But I really like that line work, so maybe I'll just refine that line work, do it digitally. And then I did the line work, and I was like, well, I might as well color it in. And so it sort of naturally evolved that way, which wasn't the sort of way of working I was using before that so much. Line is something that's kind of crept into my work again recently, but hasn't been about for a long time. And then basically it made sense to just continue that approach for the board game as well, and continue that kind of style, because I really like the fact that you can use the limited palette, and because you've got lines, it means you don't have to worry about like shading and things like that. You can put in a bunch of details, and none of that gets lost, and you don't have to spend like hours and hours making sure that you've got all these kind of bits covered. So it's kind of an economy of design, I guess, which is something I find really fascinating anyway when I'm illustrating stuff.
And just give us a little bit of an overview. We don't have to go into the crazy details of it, but just in general, like, it is a board game, and maybe I should like back up a little bit and go, okay, my channel's like really TTRPGs, but like what games were you playing when you said you're playing D&D? Was it like 5e or older? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's 5e. Like I've played like Merkborg and stuff with my mate, and we did like stuffed fables, and there's been a couple of other ones that have like rocked up, but 5e is the one I've played the most of. And I kind of got into it through Critical Role and all that kind of stuff as well, which is is a common route. But yeah, so I haven't got a huge amount of TTRPG kind of experience, but I love it when I get the chance to do it. But I tend to do a bit more board games. But it's inspired by a lot of that sort of approach to everything. Like, it's a really interesting thing because there's discussions about whether we could turn this into a TTRPG at some point as well, which would be really cool because it would be like a full circle going back. But yeah, the whole point of the game is that it's supposed to have this kind of feeling of doing some of the combat of 5e or something where you are battling monsters, and it's about kind of collecting allies and items and using these to kind of fight these monsters that would otherwise seem kind of impossible. And it's a hand management, hand kind of builder. So you're spending actions to buy cards that make your hand more powerful, and using them to kind of fight monsters. And that's a solo version for anyone that can kind of see the screen. So I play solo games and stuff as well, so I wanted to make sure that I had a dedicated kind of mode for it. So it's on the back of the same board, and that's got some different systems going on in it, so that it feels like puzzly and crunchy, and you're really trying to make sure that you actually like concentrate and make sure that you get it right. And there's like risks and rewards and things within it as well. So
and so the main rules are 2 to 4 players, and then also solo rules. So there's like 2 different rule books for each one of those. And I mean, I love the fact that it's almost like I don't know how to maybe describe it other than like a Ouija board, where like you're like almost like doing your own little seance, right? Like the way it looks to me is kind of like it's fun. It looks like a game that like throws you into the vibe of it very quickly.
I hadn't thought of it being like a Ouija board at all. I've got no experience with that whatsoever, actually. But who knows? Maybe that's sort of permeated into my influence and stuff. But I mean, it's interesting because growing up, I played loads and loads of board games and card games and stuff. But my family are not nerds at all. Like, we played card games, we played like Bridge and Canasta and Newmarket and all that kind of stuff, and we played classic family games and things. Like the terrible Monopoly, but like we played lots of those things, and chess and all that sort of stuff. And so when it came to building a board game, my first instinct was like, well, it's got to have cards. And then when I started designing the back, I was like, well, it'd be nice to kind of reference that kind of classic deck of cards kind of design that you get on the back. Like it's not at all that anymore, but it's inspired by that thing of very patterny, kind of very intricate on the back, and then the fronts are supposed to be kind of really clear, really accessible, really just like none of the fuss that you often get on these things that are like making too much detail, and allowing space for the illustrations. So,
and how difficult was it to kind of get the rules kind of in scope of what you wanted to do? Because I mean, it's very difficult to like not only just design and like illustrate it, but to actually develop the rules that kind of go and work with it cohesively. How comfortable were you with that, or what kind of process did that take?
So, I mean, the process was basically just trial and error. I mean, I wasn't comfortable with it, but I wasn't uncomfortable with it because there was no pressure on it. It was just, let's do this thing. It doesn't matter how long it takes. I didn't really know what I was going to do with it when I finished it anyway. And to be honest, from the point that I kind of decided to actually try and make it a Kickstarter and, try and make it this kind of business venture, I guess, it's been through some different iterations and stuff anyway, and through a bunch more play testing and, taking on feedback from the people that have played it and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of it is just basically being aware and being kind of sort of receptive to feedback and receptive to thoughts, and like understanding when I'm watching someone like, oh, they're not enjoying that aspect, like just trying to see like, oh, they're annoyed by that, they want a bit more choice, or they want to be able to kind of have a bit more kind of reason to risk something or whatever. So I found that really fascinating, and it's some of the stuff I've enjoyed the most. Like, I've loved drawing monsters, I've loved drawing characters, but the idea of doing something totally new, of just like, okay, how does this work? What do I enjoy in a game? How can I bring that in? So yeah, that's been really fun.
And as I look at all the different components and game pieces, like this is, I have to say, a very complex production. I'm not saying it's a complex game to play, but like when I look at this, you got cards, you got meeples, you got boards, you got boxes. It looks like maybe are those patches or just stickers up there, and you got a bag and all those different elements. How it's a very ambitious first project. Did you know that going into it, or did it just kind of go, I'm gonna add this into it, I'm gonna add this into it?
It was very much the latter. It evolved. I mean, maybe a year or two ago, it must have been 2 years ago, honestly, I can't remember. Yeah, maybe it was a year ago. It was a small box game that just had cards, and I just tried it out with a score tracker, because originally the game had, you would fight these monsters and then you'd find out who won. But the problem with that was that there was no excitement to it. It was sort of anticlimactic of like, oh, you won, right, cool. And so I played around with having a score tracker, and then I was like, well, okay, if I've got a score tracker, I've got space for a board, which means actually I can be a bit more complex. I can put in some markets, which actually appeals to people that prefer these more complex kind of games anyway, because it's a midweight game. It's not like an entry level one. It's not super hard. It should be lighthearted and fun, but it's got enough crunchiness that you're thinking about combos and how to kind of be efficient with your actions and things like that. So yeah, it just evolved. It just changed. So then this small box game kind of got this other stuff, and so the one that you're looking at the moment is the deluxe one. It's a Kickstarter kind of one. There's also a retail one that doesn't have the poster, doesn't have the stickers, doesn't have the bag. Just stripped down so that people can afford it, and it's cheaper to produce, so cheaper to be able to sell it on. But then I really love like the tactile quality of playing a board game. Like that's one of the things I love about playing board games, is that I'm not on a screen. I'm not faffing about with technology. It's like a physical thing I pick up and put somewhere else, and that tactile quality for me is like really key. So making little meeples and there's these little action trackers that people love, actually, which was just this idea I had of like, because you get a certain number of actions on your turn. I just thought, well, what's a fun way to do that? Like, let's give people these little markers that they can just tick down as they spend their actions. So it's functional, but also fun, and it was just about like finding answers to different kind of questions and problems, and then adding on the fun stuff that people kept kind of asking for. They were like, oh, are you going to do a poster, or are you going to do stickers? It's like, well, I suppose I could. Yeah.
And were you able to source it all from one place? Because that's like, to me, I'm like, boy, well, where did you get the box? Where'd you get the board? Where'd you get the meat? Like, were you able to kind of find like something that could like just work in one stop shop?
Yeah. So originally I was trying to print it all in the UK, which was just not possible. I literally spent 2 years trying to find manufacturers to work with, and I was getting them to print me samples, and the quality wasn't great, and it was really expensive, and they sort of didn't seem like they cared, and they couldn't produce boards or meeples or any of that kind of stuff. It was just cards, which is why it was this small box game. And round about this time that I kind of was playing around with the track, there was also basically I'd ordered an A3 print from this company I was working with to try and test out all the different line weights on the cards, and I had them laid out on this A3 print, and they said they could only print an A3 print, so that's what I ordered. It was really expensive. It's like 20 quid or something, which for a very basic print shouldn't be that much. Anyway, it came to me as 2 A4 sheets, and I was like, oh, why have you cut it in half? And they're like, oh, it was cheaper for us to send. It's like, yes, but I paid for an A3 sheet. Like, are you going to give me any of those cost savings? Like, no, it was just cheaper for us to send. So they didn't care, and as soon as someone doesn't care, I was just like, no, I don't want to work with you anymore. Like, I want someone to be passionate about this thing. So I went to UK Games Expo to kind of show it, which is in Birmingham in the UK, obviously with UK Games Expo, which is amazing. I love it. And there was a bunch of manufacturers there, and I chatted to a few of them and got their samples and stuff. And it's looking like we'll probably be working with Panda Manufacturing, who have done a bunch of amazing stuff. They do the like Wingspan, and for some reason, all of the other games that they've produced in my head have gone. But they've done a bunch of beautiful stuff, and they're this big company that can do basically whatever you want them to do. So, and they've been great at like, because the sort of environmental impact and stuff is something that I'm keen to like try and make as low as possible. I mean, the lowest impact is to not make a board game at all, but I want to make a board game. So there's got to be, it's then like mitigating stuff. And, you know, we've been talking about like, could we wrap it in paper? Well, the problem with wrapping it in paper is when you ship it, it might get wet and ruin the games. And that's worse for the environment than just using a little bit of plastic to protect it. And, you know, they've been really great at chatting through all that stuff with me. So, yeah, now I feel like anything I wanted to do, they'd be like, yep, cool, we'll figure it out. So they've been great.
Well, I'm glad you came up with a solution, and I'm assuming, like based upon all the stuff that I've seen, that this is like almost like ready to go. You're just waiting for the final number of orders that you want to make, and then it's ready to go. Or is there still some like final details that you're working on?
There'll be a couple of little tweaks. So, you know, the game's been out with some reviewers, and it's, you know, there've been people testing it without my input at all. They've just, you know, been reading from the rule book and stuff. And there's just a couple of bits here and there where people have had questions around certain things, you know, making sure all that stuff is as kind of, you know, to the point and obvious as possible. You know, there's a couple of passes that I'll need to do on the cards to make sure that they are as, you know, as readable as possible. That I've done a cultural sensitivity check on it and stuff as well, because, you know, when you're using monsters and different characters and diverse, you know, people and stuff like that, I want to make sure that I'm not insulting anyone. I'm not, you know, taking anyone's culture or any of that kind of stuff. So it's had one pass, but it needs to have another one of those as well before it goes kind of fully to print. But it's basically just needs money now to get it produced.
Well, you're much further ahead than most, because I know like a lot of times it's just like a concept or an idea, and so it looks like you're well underway to getting this done. And with that said, you've got last time I checked, it was like 3,700 folks waiting on Kickstarter to be notified on launch, which is incredible. So
yeah,
I'm assuming this is going to be a huge success. And I think where I got hooked in immediately, because I'm an animation nerd and aspiring kind of animator, I love all that kind of stuff, was the video trailer. And I think, what's the name of the company? Yeto Animation. How did this trailer come to be? That I'll play it in a second, but how did the trailer come to be?
So I've worked with the animators before a few times, but they're actually really good friends as well, like really good friends. I play board games with them like weekly. I love them as humans. They are delightful humans, and they're my favorite animators as well. Which, you know, they're just really good at, like, they do lots of frame by frame illustration stuff in their animations, and they like put the care into the bits that I really appreciate. So yeah, they've done this. I did some style frames for them. You know, we worked on a storyboard and stuff together, and kind of figured out what it is we wanted to show and make it feel kind of authentic to the game, but also, you know, this fun kind of thing to capture people's attention. But yeah, I love it. I love what they produced for it. Yeah, I think they've done a gorgeous job of it.
Okay, well, without further ado, it's like about a minute long or so. So hang tight. And if you're listening to this podcast, there's some audio here, so you're not going to be completely blindsided by this, but you should go check it out on YouTube and Spotify video. But I'll hit play now. Well, fantastic. It's
I'm gonna clap, Yeto.
yeah, fantastic. I just love seeing that kind of elegance in the trailer, and how they took your illustrations and kept the essence there. So it looks fabulous. I'm sure it's going to be a huge hit just based upon that trailer. I'd sign me up. Sign me up. I don't care what it is, but
thank you. Yeah, I mean, here's hoping. Yeah, there's been a lot of effort that's gone into it, and to kind of give it the best chance it can. You know, I've built up the kind of followers over, you know, a good few years, and there's been lots of kind of grassroots stuff and small things. And then, you know, I've done UK Games Expo in Essen and chatted to a bunch of people, sent stuff out to reviewers, which I've loved the whole process of that. But yeah, here's hoping it actually then converts and gets backed. We'll see.
And as we can kind of keep just talking about it, and but I'm going to flip some of the illustrations, just the cards themselves, kind of onto the screen here, just to give people a sense of like what the cards are going to be looking like. And you got, you know, some of the monsters, the mummy, the drake, the slayer, and how much fun was this for you to come up with each one of these monsters and like kind of give it stats and that kind of thing?
I mean, it's been my favorite part of it. I think the drawing that and the allies, which are, you know, the kind of people that you control. I've just loved it because it's the sort of stuff that I've just always done with doodling. You know, like as a kid, I would sit and draw, you know, a muscly dude with a big sword or whatever, and that would be kind of how I'd spend my afternoon. And so the idea that I then get to do that and it's got a practical purpose. But yeah, doing all the kind of stats and figuring out kind of you know, immunities to certain types of damage and all that kind of stuff. Like my favorite thing was like the whole game is built thematically. So you have certain monsters that you would expect certain things of, and it then has like effects related to that. So, you know, we've got the screamer on the screen, which is, you know, essentially I imagine they've got this kind of mouth that like opens up and they scream, and it means that all the kind of basic attacks that your allies would do less damage. And the idea is that because they're screaming, they're distracting you, and it's making it harder for you to concentrate and all that kind of stuff. So there's like a reasoning behind all these different things. And like the slime is immune to all attacks except magical and elemental, because the other ones would do nothing to slime. So it's all kind of thinking, you know, how does this actual monster exist in this world? And you know, giving it this little bit of flavor text and stuff as well, so that people can kind of think about it in a storytelling sense as well. The Goliath toad, the first thing it does is eat one of your allies, so they're gone. You've got to kill one of your cards. Like, it's just fun to think of these things, and that's the one that's in the trailer and stuff as well. But yeah, I've loved it. And one of the things that I've loved so much about the process is because I haven't had a client, I haven't had to worry too much about like sometimes they sort of get into a certain thing of, oh, it's got to fit the same style. They've all got to kind of naturally sit next to each other. And actually there's a couple of different approaches I've used in this, where like some of the monsters are actually genuinely quite creepy and others are just like a bit more fun and bizarre. But because I've got the same color palette going, I think they all blend together okay. I think they all, you know, they all work. And for me, it creates more of a variety. And I think, you know, anyone that's played a TTRPG, like D&D, for example, you will find like these monsters that are terrifying and you're like genuinely freaked out by them, and then you'll turn around and find this weird little gribbly that's like attacking your feet, and it's like, what is this thing? And so I wanted it to have that feel of like, some of them are, they can still do damage to you, but they're just like weird little creatures that exist in this world. So yeah, I mean, that's been one of my favorite kind of bits as well.
And do you have a favorite that you go like, this one really turned out the way I wanted it to?
Do you know what? I don't know. I can't think off the top of my head, to be honest, because yeah, I'm seeing these other ones in front of me that it's hard to bear in mind. I think you're going to come to the dragon in a minute. I like the dragon. Yeah, the roaming dragon. It's just like a classic, you know, fantasy dragon, and I really wanted it to be like the ultimate kind of classic dragon. And yeah, I had good fun drawing that. But yeah, I mean, I've got kind of certain favorites in the legends and stuff as well. Like I really like the Kraken, which has just rocked up, or the Man of the Forest. Just these ideas of ones that, like, often things are described in mythology, for example, but they've not got like a clear description, or like they're from so many different kind of cultures, or you know, over many different centuries, and so you can kind of do your own thing, but there's a certain vibe you have to do. Like the vampire, you know what you're expecting from a vampire, in that they've got to have those kind of sharp teeth. But then other than that, you can kind of, sometimes you got the like sexy vampires that try to seduce everyone, but I prefer the vampires that like, what is this gross thing in front of me? So I thought it'd be fun to do that. You know, some of these legends are genuinely quite creepy. The Dreamwalker freaks me out. And you know, there's nods to like some, what's it called, popular culture and all that kind of stuff as well. Drawing the items and stuff was really fun as well. Just thinking about like, what can these magical items be? figuring out kind of everything from armors to spell books to there's a bomb, which is just really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it all is so perfectly blended, and it just hits that vibe for me that I really like. I mean, I love 60s and 70s children's books myself. I'm just a big fan of that, and all these illustrations are just so evocative and colorful. And I'm just going to put now here on the heroes. Are these the allies?
Yeah, so there are 4 heroes, which are starting cards, and then you have a bunch of allies. So there's like 50 allies, 4 heroes. But yeah, like with these, I really wanted to make sure that there was kind of like a real mix of kind of all the sort of tropes that you would want to kind of find in there, and like getting a feeling that they're like more than just what you're seeing as well. And I really wanted to play around with what point I'm like cutting them off as well. So the Berserker, for example, you've got a full shot, whereas the Stonebreaker here, they cut off at their waist, because I'm sort of interested in different details on different ones. The Stonebreaker, like, I didn't really care what the bottom half of their body looked like. I cared about the big muscles at the top, so that was really fun to play with as well, like figuring out like how far zoomed in and how far zoomed out and stuff I'm going, and then like fitting it into the space. Like it's kind of a complex thing, but I'm really pleased with how they kind of rocked out and turned out.
Well, so it launches on the 18th.
Yeah.
And you're gonna like hit the button and like sweat a little bit, and I'm sure it's gonna be a big hit. But have you already thought of, like, you mentioned the TTRPG perhaps in the future? Have you thought of like how this could potentially just change your life?
Do you know what? I think it's already changed my life, genuinely. Like, I mean, at the risk of it sounding cheesy, but the level of joy that I've got from building the board game means that I'm gonna keep making board games, regardless of how popular this game turns out to be. If people don't like it, cool. I'll take that as feedback. I'll figure out kind of what it is I need to adjust. Or maybe I won't. Maybe I'll just do the same thing again, but a better version, and just keep making these things. But I've got ideas for more board games. I've got ideas for expansions for this one. I've had great feedback and stuff from people playing it as well, and like witnessing people enjoy your game is so amazing. It's so lovely, because I a lot of my professional career is doing stuff for magazines or advertising or whatever, where I don't get to see the reactions to it. And even with kids' books, like, I can read them to my kids, but I don't know. So it's not quite the same as like seeing it out in the wild. And I my dream is to hopefully like walk into a games cafe and someone's got it out and they're playing it, and I can be like, I made that. I probably wouldn't say that. I'd probably just watch what they were doing. But yeah, at these games cons and stuff, like seeing people kind of laughing as they kind of mess each other up, or like being stressed as to see whether they can kind of get those final 2 points to be able to beat someone else, like, that's really fun. So yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna give up my day job, even if this thing does really, really well. It's part of my day job. I think that's the thing. Like, board games are here to stay no matter what.
Well, great. And where can people find you? I'll put links to all of these. Where can they find you for more information? I'll put the links to the Kickstarter and your Instagram, I think, are kind of like your key ones. But is there other places? You got your website?
Yeah, I've got my website. I mean, it's to be honest, Instagram, and I've got a mailing list that's kind of good for any extra stuff. But if you sign up to the Kickstarter, then and back it, then you would get kind of emails about what's going on, stuff as well. But I try to give kind of behind the scenes stuff. There's going to be things around kind of the community getting to choose certain artworks and things like that, and getting to choose cards and things. So yeah, hopefully it will be a fun experience being part of it. But yeah, at Fame and Fable is my Instagram. Or if you want to just see my stuff, it's at Owen Davey Draws, and I'm on Twitter or X or whatever that thing's called now, but I genuinely don't go on it. And Facebook, I'm also the same. There's probably no point even following me on them. So yeah, Instagram's where it's at.
Cool. Well, Owen, thanks for joining us and sharing a bit of your process and your lovely game and illustrations. Really appreciate that.
Thank you so much. Yeah, no, it's nice to chat to you.